Welcome to this first training module in a series of 4 prepared according to the requirements of the Institute of Asset Management's Foundation Award. My name is Justine Bilodeau, and I will be your host for this first module, which is an introduction to asset management. Here is the program for this first module. First, we will present the history of the asset management discipline and talk about the events that have led to a collective awareness of the importance of effective asset management. Then, in order to ensure that we have a common understanding of the terms and thus be able to build our knowledge on a solid foundation, we will set out the definitions of asset management, asset, and value. Once the definitions are known, we will present in more detail what asset management is and what this discipline can bring to an organization more than simply managing assets. While many organizations may say that they manage assets on a daily basis, far fewer can say that they have a comprehensive and effective asset management system in place. This system is based on 4 pillars as presented by the ISO 55000 standard. These pillars will be presented to you with the help of examples. We will also show you that when these pillars are properly put in place, asset management becomes meaningful and many benefits can result. Finally, we will emphasize that asset management is implemented by the organization's employees as well as internal and external stakeholders. It is therefore essential to understand the requirements and expectations of stakeholders with regards to asset management. At the end of this module, we will offer you a short quiz to consolidate what you have learned and review the essential notions. This will also prepare you for the certification test that you will have access to after completing the 4 training modules, which will attest to your success in the Foundation Award. Let's start with the history of the discipline. In fact, professionals and businesses have been learning to take care of our assets since prehistoric men invented tools. So, we've been managing assets for almost all of our lives. Over the years, disciplines have been developed to better define the care that should be provided to assets over their lifetimes. In recent years, a new concept has emerged, that of asset management. In 2014, the new ISO 55000 standard formalized its foundations. It provides a framework for the development of an asset management system and its implementations through asset management plans. Let's take a closer look at the origins of asset management using this timeline. The term asset management began to be used in the private and public sectors in various parts of the world in the 1980s. At that time, the public sector was facing declining service levels and increasing maintenance and operating costs due to poor investment planning. Then, the second oil crash in the 1980s and the explosion of the Piper Alpha oil rig in 1988 led to a growing awareness of the importance of maintenance and good asset management. The Cullen Inquiry that started in November 1988 to establish the cause of the Piper Alpha disaster concluded that the initial leak was the result of maintenance work carried out simultaneously on a connected pump and a safety valve. Although both crews performing maintenance work had performed their duties in full compliance with procedures, the disaster occurred because no one realized the danger of performing the work simultaneously. There was therefore a problem of alignment between the various work teams and a flagrant lack of overall vision. This disaster highlighted the importance of communication and collaboration between the different silos of the organization. This led to the adoption of an asset management policy by the National Council of the United States, emphasizing the achievement of the desired level of service at the lowest life cycle cost. In 2002, we saw the beginning of the global convergence to develop the discipline of asset management. In fact, since these years, several international organizations have been looking at methods to initiate ways of doing things in asset management. Some of the proposed approaches were more specific and others more global. Among these publications, PAS 55 was initially produced in 2004 by a number of organizations under the leadership of the Institute of Asset Management. PAS provides guidelines and a checklist of 28-point requirements for good practice in the management of physical assets and generally applies to gas, electricity and water utilities, road, air and rail transport systems, public facilities, processing, manufacturing, and natural resources industries. It also applies to the public and private sectors, regulated and unregulated environments. Several other documents referring to good asset management practices have been developed by national organizations such as the United States Environmental Protection Agency's Guide to Good Asset Management Practice and the Infrastructure Management Manual produced by the Australian Institute of Public Works. From these exchanges were born winning concepts, best practice guides, and a community of exchange. From these guides came the ISO 55000 standard, which was adopted in 2014. This globally recognized standard provides organizations with a common language and a robust decision-making framework for the consistent application of asset management practices across different types of organizations around the world. It is aligned with other management standards such as ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, enabling an organization to develop a consistent set of management practices for all facets of its operations. The TC 251 committee is responsible for the development of the ISO 55000 family of asset management standards. The discipline of asset management has gained popularity with various organizations facing concerns about their assets. Among these concerns, 5 main ones stand out. Without a well-established asset management system, organizations generally have a lack of knowledge of their assets, face challenges in prioritizing investments, interventions, and projects, have difficulty planning for the long term and managing their assets in a preventive manner, and tend to work in silos, which affects the quality of service offered. We will take the time to look in more detail at each of these 5 concerns and illustrate them with examples. Although organizations own and manage many assets, their knowledge of these assets is often limited. No reliable source of information on assets exists, making it difficult to establish a complete inventory, to know the state of these assets, their criticality, their performance, and the costs associated with them. The lack of quality information greatly affects decision-making. The lack of knowledge on assets therefore directly affects the prioritization of investments, interventions, and projects. The asset portfolio is aging, and there is no process to assess the highest priority investments or their urgency. We often hear organizations say that they do not have enough money to ensure the sustainability of their assets, but they often do not really know how much money would be needed either. It is also noted that organizations that do not have an asset management approach in place face reactive management due to a lack of long-term planning. Organizations make decisions about assets in response to events without considering costs, risks, and long-term performance over the entire life cycle. Senior management makes strategic decisions far removed from the reality of the assets. Operational decisions, on the other hand, are made on the basis of the limited information available locally and, as a result, tend to be highly reactive. Let's illustrate the distinction between an organization that manages its asset reactively versus one that takes a proactive approach. In terms of maintenance, reactive management is when an organization makes interventions and repairs to its assets following inspections that are scheduled at a given frequency. Thus, failures are noticed and then repaired. With this approach, it is difficult, if not impossible, to predict the costs related to future interventions over the entire life cycle and to estimate when the asset in question will need to be replaced. In comparison, an organization that proactively manages its assets will implement preventive or even predictive maintenance activities, making it possible to monitor the evolution of asset degradation and modulate intervention periods. This will greatly increase the lifespan of the assets and enable them to prevent and predict costly corrective maintenance interventions, thus greatly reducing the maintenance expenses. These organizations also tend to work in silos. The organizational culture is fragmented, and some departments operate according to their own agendas. Each team, so engineering, finance, maintenance, has its own specialty, language, and territory, and works in isolation from the other teams. They do not have a common language and therefore cannot resolve the organizational issues that affect them all and make the right decisions that consider all factors involved. The approach of working in silos is often noticed between maintenance and operation teams. In all sectors, maintenance is generally seen as a service rather than an integral part of production and operations. This is not the best approach. In order to improve uptime and therefore production, manufacturers should instead set up their maintenance teams to operate proactively rather than reactively. In an organizational structure where the maintenance and production departments are separate, conflicts arise when maintenance tries to take equipment out of service before it takes itself out of service. Operational teams often take a reactive approach to keeping things running, while maintenance team often tries to take a more proactive approach. While taking an asset out of service for preventive maintenance can reduce long-term costs, some maintenance teams have difficulty communicating this to operations. For them, it appears that productivity will be greatly affected while maintenance technicians are completing their work. In reality, maintenance has the same objective as production, which is to keep the business running and make a profit without excessive costs. Good communication supported by data can help bridge the gap and make operations more efficient in the long run. All of these elements ultimately lead to a decrease in service offered. The customer is less and less satisfied. In the long term, this damages the reputation of the organization. Asset management must therefore be seen as a solution to these concerns. But what is the official definition of asset management? Asset management refers to the set of coordinated activities of an organization to realize value from its assets. Asset management is for all types of organizations, large, small, private, public, governmental, or non-profit. Value creation involves a balance between costs, risks, and performance. Assets are elements, things, or entities that have potential or actual value to an organization. Assets are any item of economic value belonging to an individual or company. These include items such as buildings, utility infrastructures such as power cables, water pipes, rail lines, and subway tunnels, as well as industrial assets such as oil rigs, chemical plants, and process plants conveyors. It is important to distinguish between the act of managing assets and the holistic approach of asset management. Asset management is not only related to maintenance activities. In fact, maintenance is one of the activities to be controlled by the asset management system. But more broadly, asset management is an approach that seeks to get the most out of the assets. Nor is asset management a substitute for quality management. Rather, asset management seeks to achieve a balance between the risks, costs, and performance of assets, which will enable the organization to create value from its assets. The asset management system, as presented by ISO, is compatible with other management systems. The use of an integrated systems approach allows an organization's asset management system to build on elements from its other management systems, including quality, environment, health and safety, and risk management. The asset management system is not a project management system either. Rather, it is a recognition that assets have a life cycle and that they must be managed with an understanding and a global view of that cycle. Doing asset management is not limited to project management related to the assets. Moreover, asset management is not limited to engineers or finance people. In fact, anyone who has contact with assets in the organization should be involved. Asset management engages at multiple levels within organizations and their supply chains. It requires people from different functions and disciplines to work more closely than ever before. Finally, asset management is not a purely academic discipline. It is a pragmatic and practical subject that enables organizations to make informed decisions based on existing information while aligning with strategic objectives. It is now clear that asset management has a broader focus than simply managing assets. This is illustrated in different ways with employees, stakeholders, senior management, and suppliers. For employees, asset management will result in interdepartmental collaboration, optimization of allocated resources and activities, implementation of strategies for operating assets throughout their life cycle, and information-supported decision-making based on the strategic context and client needs. For stakeholders, asset management will focus on value creation and clarity of mission so that activities are aligned with the organization's strategic objectives. For senior management, asset management will promote long-term vision, the development of the skills and capabilities of all employees, and the mitigation of business risks. Finally, for suppliers, asset management will foster long-term contracts, which will strengthen partnership relations in support of customer value and objectives, and enable suppliers to understand the customer strategy and needs 5 to 10 years down the road. According to the ISO 55000 standard, asset management is based on 4 pillars. These pillars are essential to the implementation and success of the asset management system and distinguish the holistic discipline of asset management from simply managing assets. These pillars are value, alignment, leadership, and assurance. Let's start with value. An organization builds assets in order to create value within its organizations and with its stakeholders. Value is realized throughout the life cycle and is achieved by balancing costs, risks, and performance, by establishing decision-making processes that reflect the needs of the stakeholder. This will be presented in more detail in Module 3. Value decompartmentalizes different objectives for different departments by enabling a common vision. Value should be a clear statement of how asset management objectives align with organizational objectives. In this way, reference is made not only to economic value, but to the value of the assets to the client. Of course, this means that the notion of value can differ greatly from one organization to the other. The value pillar enables organizations to link its assets to the delivery of the expected service. Value is created from assets when they enable us to efficiently deliver the expected service while limiting risks and costs. Let's take the time to illustrate the concept of value with an example. Let's take a simple asset, such as a bicycle path. The primary purpose of this asset is to allow people to travel by bicycle. However, there are many different types of bike paths. Some are found in parks and are intended to meet the demand for bicycle tourism. Other bike paths are found in urban areas and are intended to promote active transportation in downtown areas as an alternative to car use. Thus, the value attributed to these two types of bicycle paths would not be the same for different cities with different organizational objectives. A large city wishing to reduce traffic in its downtown area and promote active transportation would opt for the bicycle path in an urban setting, while a local government wishing to attract tourists would opt for the bicycle path in a park area. This example demonstrates the possible differences in the assessment of value in relation to strategic objectives. The second pillar is alignment. In asset management, it is of great importance that asset management objectives are aligned with organizational objectives. The decisions and strategies implemented by senior management must take into account asset capacity, performance, opportunities, and constraints. Alignment will ensure that staff are made aware of the purpose of the organization and the objective of the work they are undertaking. Alignment gives staff direct visibility into why the actions to be taken are necessary, not just when and how to do it. Alignment brings considerable benefits in prioritizing and coordinating objectives and stimulates creativity and innovation, since it is easier to identify new and better ways to achieve objectives. The importance of this pillar will be explained in Module 2. The third pillar of asset management is leadership. Leadership and culture play a key role in the realization of value. Indeed, leadership and the visible commitment of senior management are necessary for effective asset management. People are likely to judge the importance of asset management to an organization based on where the responsibility lies in senior management. Leadership includes clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and authorities, ensuring that employees are informed, qualified, and engaged in consultation with employees and stakeholders. This pillar will be reviewed in Module 4. The fourth pillar is assurance. Assurance is a combination of monitoring and auditing processes to confirm that assets, systems, and processes are operating as intended. The purpose of assurance is to ensure that the asset management approach enables assets to meet their objective consistently and sustainably over time. Assurance promotes effective governance, control processes, and robust risk management. The monitoring must be carried out at all stages of the life cycle in accordance with a vision of continuous improvement. This pillar will also be presented in Module 4. When the pillars are effectively put in place, asset management becomes meaningful and many benefits can result. We will take the time to explain 7 of these benefits. By increasing the understanding of costs across the entire life cycle of assets, asset management can improve profitability and financial performance. Indeed, it is easier to plan for the long-term investments that will be required to maximize the life of assets and avoid costly reactive interventions in terms of productivity and material. Also, asset management informs decision-making by providing information on assets. The asset management system translates organizational objectives into asset management objectives, which, in turn, leads to the definition of criteria for prioritizing projects and investments so as to increase the value produced by the assets for the organization. The same notion of value takes into consideration risk mitigation. The risk-based approach to asset management helps organizations build resilience to external risks, enabling them to better control and mitigate the risks that may arise from the management and operation of the assets. For example, where assets have been underutilized or neglected, They can often be managed more appropriately by systematically assessing and addressing the potential risk they pose to the organization. This integration of risk, performance, and costs enables the organization to improve the quality of its service. Asset management enables all stakeholders and actors to better understand the impact that assets have on the delivery of service. Assets are no longer seen as individual tools. Instead, they are seen as a whole, enabling value creation and the achievement of organizational objectives. Furthermore, all organizations must comply with the legislation applicable to their assets and asset management activities. Most organizations must also comply with internal and external technical standards, such as industry or sector regulations. These standards must be taken into account when developing asset management strategy, objectives, and plans in the execution of lifecycle activities. The asset management system therefore ensures compliance with these standards. Compliance with the requirements can also be demonstrated and assessed during audits and review processes of the asset management system. This notion will be covered in Module 4. Also, asset management places a great deal of importance over the entire management of the lifecycle activities. This encourages the establishment of interdisciplinary and collaborative processes to ensure a sustainable and balanced approach to economic activity, environmental sustainability, and social progress to ensure that all activities are sustainable. This is part of a sustainable development approach. Finally, the last benefit of asset management presented here may be much more difficult to measure, but may be just as important in terms of revenue generation or overall business performance, namely, the enhancement of the organization's reputation. There is ample evidence that effective asset management can enhance an organization's reputation given its ability to operate safely, mitigate risks, and meet regulatory and legal obligations. In short, asset management ensures that the right people have the right information to make the best decision at the right time during the life cycle, following efficient processes for the benefit of the organization. This key phrase that summarizes what asset management is first put the focus on the people. Indeed, it is essential to remember that it is people who do asset management. Asset management is not a software or a computer system. It is first and foremost a discipline that requires the involvement of people from different functions and expertise to work more closely than they would have done before. The organization's employees, as well as external and internal stakeholders, have their role to play to ensure the success of the process. It is therefore essential to understand the requirements and needs of these stakeholders in respect to asset management. In asset management, a stakeholder is any person or organization that can be affected by, perceive itself to be affected by, or influence an organization's decision in relation to its assets. Stakeholders can thus have an impact on the management of an organization's assets. Understanding their requirements and expectations is therefore a crucially important activity. Stakeholders with an interest in an organization's asset management activities include internal stakeholders, such as senior management and employees, and external stakeholders, such as customers, governments, the local community and neighbors, regulators, labor organizations, suppliers, and social, cultural, and environmental groups. The internal stakeholders will need to be involved in the determination of asset management objectives to ensure their collaboration and understanding of the requirement of the asset management system. On the other end, most stakeholders are external, defined as those stakeholders are not under the direct control of the organization. However, stakeholder engagement is influenced by what an organization does internally. to align the results of these interactions with the organization's strategic objectives. It is therefore important to properly develop internal communications and management structures for external stakeholders, as these can affect an organization's asset management activities positively or negatively. Among the positive impacts, governments and regulators have the power to influence legislations and regulations in favor of the organization. Suppliers can help to reduce the length of the supply chain and offer better quality raw materials. External stakeholders can also represent financial opportunities. On the other end, these same stakeholders can have negative impact on asset management activities if alignment is deficient. Suppliers could introduce defective equipment into the supply chain. Regulators and governments could refuse to issue an operating license. Labor organizations could hinder operations through strikes. Financing providers could reduce the operating budget, and customers could reduce their demand for the product. Therefore, it is very important to maintain healthy relationships with stakeholders. The quality of relationships determines how stakeholders interact with an organization and the extent to which they support the strategy and objectives. Effective stakeholder engagement strengthens an organization's ability to manage its assets effectively, reliably, and efficiently. It may also involve understanding and managing conflicting expectations and requirements from different groups of stakeholders. This concludes the theoretical component of the first training module leading to the Foundation Award certification. During this workshop, we presented the history of asset management and distinguished between the holistic discipline of asset management and the more limited activity of managing assets. We also understood the importance of aligning asset management activities and objectives with organizational objectives. We have also presented the importance of generating maximum value by minimizing life cycle costs for an appropriate tolerance of risk and performance for the organization. Indeed, value creation is the essence of asset management. We have also specified that stakeholders have a large part to play in asset management. Therefore, it is essential to consider their requirements and expectations. In order to consolidate the knowledge acquired in this module, we offer you a short quiz to go back over the essential notions. First of all, what is the definition of asset management? You have three choices. So A, element, thing, or entity that has potential or actual value to an organization. B, a substitute for project or quality management. Or C, the coordinated activities of an organization to realize value for its assets. As mentioned in slide 13 of this module, asset management is the set of coordinated activities of an organization to realize value from its assets. The second question relates to the pillars of asset management. Once again, we offer you three choices. So A, value, long-term planning, leadership, and risk management. B, value, alignment, leadership, and assurance. And C, alignment, decision-making, stakeholder management, and service delivery. The pillars of asset management are value, alignment, leadership, and assurance. The elements proposed in the other options, such as long-term planning, risk management, and decision-making, are still important elements of asset management, but they're not recognized as pillars by the ISO 55000 standard. You will now be able to proceed to Module 2 of our Foundation Award certification training. In this module, we will look in more detail at the alignment pillar, present the ISO 55000 asset management system composed of the policy, the strategic plan, and the asset management plans. And finally, we will introduce you to the IAM conceptual model, which presents asset management under 6 main themes. This concludes the first module. I hope you enjoy your session.